Let's speak to Republican strategist Rina Shah and Robert Creamer, Democratic political consultant. Thank you both very much for your time. Mr. Creamer, first of all, your response to this news. Is it the right decision by Joe Biden?
I think it is. I think the United States found it necessary in the face of aggression, increased aggression. I mean, the Russians have brought in North Korean troops now to supplement their forces. And the MP from Ukraine referenced the attack on Kyiv just the other day. If there is a negotiation, it has to be taken in the context of at least a stalemate. Certainly not Russian advances, and every indication is that the Trump administration plans to withdraw a lot of American support for this country that's trying to defend its own territorial integrity and democracy.
Let me just bring in Rina Shah.
Because he's very close to Putin.
Sorry to interrupt. Let me just bring in Rina Shah. Do you agree with that assessment, or do you think this is a dangerous escalation?
Right now, what I see happening is someone trying to score cheap political points in Washington, and that someone is sitting U.S. President Joe Biden. You know, look, this doesn't have to be looked at through a partisan lens. One fact is true, is that Joe Biden is a lame duck president, whether he likes it or not. He's serving out his term. End of January, President-elect Trump comes in, and everything will change because Trump and Vance, his VP-elect, will be changing how America handles the situation between Russia and Ukraine. You know, this is the issue. This is an issue about sovereignty. And I do believe it is the American way to have the backs of our allies and to have the backs of nations that believe in having to keep their sovereignty without having to concede land. But one thing we saw over the past many weeks and months as Trump-Vance campaigned is talk of land concession. So we know that will happen. But right now, what I want to say about Biden is that him doing this feels very late. He and Blinken have always seemed a day late and a dollar short for giving Ukraine what they need and what they've asked for in order to succeed and fight back this Russian aggression.
OK, so Robert Creamer, is this effectively too late? Is it literally just going to potentially help the Ukrainians hold a bit of territory in the Kursk region? And really, is it going to make any tangible difference if Donald Trump is going to push for a negotiated settlement quickly?
You know, I think that President Biden has done a marvelous job of threading a needle he had to thread. And that was supporting Ukraine on the one hand and preventing American engagement directly in a conflict with Russia on the other. And this is another step in the direction of trying to thread that needle effectively without causing the prospect of American engagement on the one hand, but not allowing Ukraine to just be left. For the next 2.5 months, President Biden is the president. 2 months or so, and he has that obligation until he turns over the keys.
And yet we have had, Robert Creamer, you know, quite a reaction from Moscow, by all accounts, you know, with them seeing this as a dangerous escalation and saying there will be a response. Is the US, should NATO allies not be concerned at that?
Oh, I think we should be concerned about Russia's intentions, period.
But of course, you know, their response goes beyond what they're doing in Ukraine.
Yeah, my guess is that the Russians are going to make as much noise as they can to try and cool the jets of American support for Ukraine as much as they can. I think that this administration has shown itself to have a very clear, balanced, and mature sense of what's necessary to do that. Thread that needle effectively. We are very worried about what might happen when an erratic, unhinged president like Donald Trump takes office.
Rina Shah, are you basically arguing that Joe Biden should have given more help to Ukraine or less? And in terms of where we are now, are you concerned that Donald Trump will effectively just concede Ukrainian territory to Moscow?
I remember 2.5 years ago, at the beginning of this conflict, at the beginning of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, when Zelensky and his ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova, came before a joint session of U.S. Congress and begged and pleaded for them to close the skies. And at that time, Nancy Pelosi really showed her true colors and saying, sure, we have your back, we'll give you everything you need, without giving them what they needed at the time, whether it was closing the skies, which obviously we would have needed our NATO allies to comply with us on that, or whether it was fighter jets, whatever it was. I think what we're looking at here 2.5 years later is a situation in which much of the Republican segment of the country and those who voted for Donald Trump this time feel extremely let down by Biden's leadership on this front. We have poured billions upon billions of dollars over to Ukraine without end in sight. Now, look, I'm somebody that understands that being a pro-democracy advocate means that we need to have Ukraine's back for as long as it takes. We can't let them concede land to Putin. But that is what Trump Vance wants to do. So from a purely analytical standpoint, I think we should understand that this issue has a lot of gray here. I've checked in with some of my Republican members of that House this morning, friends of mine, and they say they have mixed feelings about it because, of course, we want Ukraine to succeed. But they are saying to me, and I also feel this way as well, that this is a slap in the face from Biden to Trump, because Trump has been very open in how he wants us to be top of the list in ending this Russian aggression in Ukraine. He wants to solve that conflict.
Robert Creamer, if President Trump does do a negotiated settlement eventually, what are the risks that you see after that? Because obviously in Europe there's a concern that Moscow at some point, maybe after this Trump presidency, then feels that is a license for them to repeat that behaviour.
Absolutely. I mean, if Trump essentially tries to impose a settlement that is similar to what Moscow wants, they will take this as a great victory, and it will embolden them to take similar action when it comes to Poland, when it comes to Moldova, when it comes to other countries in Europe. And I think it's something that Europeans ought to be very, very worried about.
And yet, obviously, there is not the political appetite in the US, and many would ask whether there's the political appetite, frankly, in Europe to put in the cost needed, the finance needed to continue to fight this, Robert Creamer.
Well, I'm personally hopeful that the Europeans will step up and do everything they can to fill whatever holes that are left by President Trump. But
I mean, that's a huge that's a huge financial gap, isn't it? I mean, it seems unlikely.
It's a problem. That's right. It is a problem. And the United States should not count on that and should do what it needs to do to continue to provide the support that we ought to provide.
And Rina Shah, it's not clear, is it, what Donald Trump actually wants in terms of the outcome. I know they've obviously talked about he's obviously talked about ending the war very quickly, but will that not look like just defeat?
Well, we can be clear on a couple of things here, is that Trump makes campaign promises and sometimes they don't come to fruition when he's in office. We have his first term to look at based on his promises in 2016. A wall at the U.S. Mexico, our southern border, would have been built. It was never completed by the time he left office. He started it, never finished it. So when it comes to, again, the handling of geopolitical tensions, I don't know that we can take Trump at his word. I mean, it's anyone's guess. Will he really go sit with Putin and say, let's make a deal? This is something he loves to market himself as. But the reality here is, to my co-panelist's point, is that if Putin declares a win, if he gets land in a deal with Trump, then one thing is also clear here. Trump will also say that was a win because he will say he ended that conflict. So that's just the reality of what we're dealing with here.
Rina Shah, Robert Creamer, thank you very much indeed both for your time today.